Hey guys, it's Shaylin. I'm here today with another writing video. Today I've got a pretty quick video. I wanted to talk about a pacing hack that is so easy and so straightforward. This is one of those writing tips that changed my life. I mean, it wasn't really a tip. To be fair, I just realized this. But to be fair, it doesn't take a genius to realize this because it's extremely obvious. And yet, I've never heard anyone say this before. It's almost too obvious to realize. But once I started using this hack, I became good at something that I used to be terrible at. I used to be very bad at pacing. I considered pacing one of my greatest weaknesses. I had very large pacing issues in all my novels. The pacing was just a mess. When I started doing this, suddenly the feedback on my work was great pacing, consistently over and over. Very consistent feedback that I've gotten on my novel from everyone who's read it is that the pacing is really consistent and strong. And I was stunned when I first started getting this feedback because pacing used to be something I really struggled with, and this is the thing that changed my ability to pace. And it is the simplest tip. Know what a chapter is in your book and do it consistently. Chapters are such a crucial tool, and we don't really talk about them enough. And I think that the way a lot of people see chapters is in a counterproductive way. And I get this sense from the way that I used to see chapters and a lot of questions that I get. A lot of people worried that their chapters are too long or too short. There is no set length that a chapter needs to be. And I think the big mistake that I used to make is that I saw chapters as a tool for readability, that essentially a chapter ended at a natural break for the reader. I didn't see chapters as a consistent tool to pace the book, that the chapters were the sections of the book that you could use in a repeatable way in order to ensure consistent pacing. I think the biggest mistake you can make with chapters is think that there's a set thing chapters need to be. Chapters need to be this length. They don't. A chapter can be literally as long or short as you need. What you want to do with chapters is figure out what a chapter is in your book. A chapter is just a division of a novel. So what you want to do when you start writing a novel is ask, what do chapters mean in my book? Not just what is the average chapter length that I'm going for, though if you know what the chapters do, you will likely have a consistent average chapter length. But what is the purpose of a chapter in relation to my pacing? I've talked about this before in my novel Honey Vinegar, and I did this because I was discovery writing the book, which is something I find funny just because, plotting elitists will say that pantsed books have terrible structure and terrible pacing, but my plotted books had terrible pacing, and my pantsed novel that I discovery wrote had really great pacing. And that's been consistent feedback that I've gotten over and over again. And it was because I did this thing. And I did this thing because I was discovery writing. So I was I don't have an outline to ensure my pacing is good, even though my outlines never gave me good pacing because I'm not a natural outliner who knows how to outline well. Not saying that outlining is bad for pacing. I'm just bad at outlining. So it's I have to find a way to ensure good pacing. Okay, well, let me just think about what my chapters are, because I'm just writing the book one chapter at a time, so if I do that consistently, theoretically, I should have good pacing. So I kind of saw each chapter in that book as a short story, in that each one kind of had a short story structure. There was an inciting incident that would trigger the event of that chapter. There would be an escalation to that mini event. There would be a mini event, and that mini event would kind of cause the inciting incident of the next chapter. So I saw the structure of my novel as a series of interlinked short stories, where each short story built upon the overarching narrative. And what this gave me was a very consistent unit for my chapters. All my chapters kind of had the same thing. They had kind of the same consistent structure. They all circled around a singular but core event. And as a result of the fact that I was viewing them as a short story, they all developed information that related to that event, so I could have pretty consistent information reveal. I also consciously wanted to make sure that my main character made a choice in every chapter so that she was always active, and I knew that she was always an active participant on the plot. Because typically the reader will feel the plot moving when the main character is being active and making choices that affect the plot, not just when things are happening. So I did that consistently throughout the whole book, and I kind of saw chapters in this distinct unit. Were they all the same length? No, but most of my chapters were between 4,000 and 6,000 words because they all had the same core building blocks. And because I used chapters essentially in this really clean way where I knew exactly what a chapter in my book was, and I just did that over and over and over. And at the points where I wanted the pacing to be faster, I could make the chapters a little shorter and make those mini escalations a little faster. And at the points where I wanted the reader sit with things a little longer, I could stretch out those mini arcs a little more, give them a little more breathing room, but overall, still have this consistent unit. I was able to move my book in a really consistent unit towards the ending and have this consistent pacing throughout. Now, you don't have to use chapters the same way that I did in that book. That's the thing. And with another book, I use chapters in a completely different way. But when you start a book, ask, okay, what is a chapter in relation to my pacing? Like, how big a step do I take? If you want really slow pacing, maybe you're even going to say, okay, I'm going to have a major event in a 3-chapter arc. So I'm going to have the first chapter, which is going to be build up to the event. The second chapter will be the event, and then the third chapter will be wind down from the event. And then in the next chapter, I'll start a 3-chapter arc. And I'll kind of have build up to event in the second chapter, wind down in the third chapter. Or maybe you have you want really fast pacing. And so you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to have a key event in every chapter, and my chapters are going to be pretty short, just 2 or 3 scenes. This is going to be the relationship between those scenes. And you're going to be able to keep up a really, really fast pacing. I like to think of this as the book's resting heart rate. If the plot starts running faster, the heart rate can escalate. And sometimes it needs to rest and slow down. But you have a resting heart rate that you can kind of play within in order to tighten or relax the pacing at moments of higher intensity or moments where you need rest and breathing space, while still having a general consistent heart rate. In every book, a chapter will have a different relationship to the pacing. But before you start writing, whether you're plotting or discovery writing, ask yourself what the unit of a chapter includes and do that consistently, and then manipulate that unit at the points that you want faster or more relaxed pacing. It is the easiest plotting hack of all time. It is so easy. All you have to do is just take a moment to think about the form of your book before you start writing. In my other novel that I'm working, chapters work very, very differently. In that book, the form shifts chapter to chapter to kind of signal the emotional relationship that the main character has to that moment of her life and how she's processing it. And so for me, in that book, a chapter ends at the end of an emotional shift. Every time there is an emotional shift, the chapter needs to end and we start again with a different form. And so the chapters have very inconsistent lengths, but each one focuses on an emotional beat and an emotional state. And because it's a very emotional plot, the book is moving kind of through emotional state, tied to emotional state. That's the causality, and so that's as well in the pacing. And you can also use larger divisions. In that book, I used parts because my chapters are very, very short in that book and a bit more inconsistent because they literally have different forms. I split the book into 6 distinct parts that all have a very consistent length and accomplish a similar thing. They all kind of accomplish a significant step in the character relationships. So each arc has a significant change in the main character's relationships with the two core relationships that the book is exploring. You can also use kind of a nested arc system, which I talked about in a video on structure tips for discovery writers, which I'll leave a link to. You can even do multiple types of chapter divisions, like parts and then chapters within it, if you want that extra bit of structure and pacing, which I found helpful in this particular book because the chapters were so short and naturally a little more inconsistent than the short story style chapters in my previous book. That is the tip. It's so easy. It's so obvious. The tip is just use chapters. It's so obvious that I never thought of it for a long time, and once I started doing that, it kind of changed my life. My question for you for this video is, how would you describe the unit of a chapter in the book that you are currently writing? What goes into a chapter for you? There's no wrong way to write a chapter. Just understand what a chapter is. I think too many people worry about the wrong or right way to write a chapter when really a chapter depends on your book. And you just want to know what that means. But that unit can kind of be whatever you need it to be and can be a tool for you, not just a place to give the reader a break. I, for too long, saw chapters as the place to give a reader a break when really it was a tool for me to control the pacing. And I didn't really take advantage of that. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video.